few left-back targets might already be off the market, with Alejandro Grimaldo supposedly getting close to a move to Atletico Madrid and Real Madrid deciding to keep Carerras at the club. Chelsea have been linked with Tottenham Hotspur midfielder Lucas Bergvall, but Kieran Gill thinks it's not going to happen. Kieran Gill also confirms a list of a few targets who Chelsea are being linked to. The legal battle between Chelsea and Man City pertaining to Maresca being tapped up seems to be getting close to reaching its conclusion. Strasbourg manager Gary O'Neil has the here we go from Fabrizio Romano to go to Ipswich, so where does that leave our French sister club? We take a look at Chelsea's first 6 games in the Premier League for next season, and finally a little bit of news about 17-year-old striker Dastan Satpayev. Welcome Blue Believers to another episode of the Stamford Sync, where we are syncing up with everything Chelsea FC, and it's a big whole news dump today, so let's just get into it. Transfer News Live posted this via Plessy Goal. Bayer Leverkusen are demanding up to 30 million euros for Alejandro Grimaldo, despite the defender having just 1 year remaining on his contract. Atletico Madrid have already reached full agreement with the Spain international, who wants the move this summer. However, the two clubs have not yet reached an agreement, with Leverkusen holding firm on their asking price. So there have been very little in the way of links for Chelsea and Grimaldo, which seems wild when you consider Xabi Alonso's coming in. He was such an important part of that team at Leverkusen, and he's continued to go from strength to strength despite getting on in years. Last season he scored 14 goals and got 12 assists, which is actually the reverse of what he managed under Xabi Alonso at Leverkusen when they won the double, and it's just felt like he's a really obvious natural option. He comes in and affects the team right now, and that gives us a little bit of a buffer in order to figure out what we want to do with the situation, and it doesn't block off pathways for the likes of Yoro Hato. But despite all that, the links to him have actually been quite terse, and there's not been a lot going around, and if this is anything to go by, maybe it completely makes sense, to be completely honest. 30 million euros for a 30-year-old player with 1 year left on his deal is not the kind of deal that Blueco would sanction when it comes down to it. Now, if Xabi Alonso was really pushing him, being like, I absolutely want this guy, like maybe there'd have been a conversation to have there, but because we haven't made any signings yet, it's difficult to know just how much input he's going to have in decisions like that. But at the same time, I get it. It's, you know, it's not the same, but similar to the Mike Maignan situation, right? He was 30, had 1 year left on his deal. We tried to really lowball AC Milan for him, when ultimately he wasn't even going to cost nearly this much. I think they wanted 15 to 20 million euros for him, and we were only willing to pay like 8. So the only thing we don't know about this is, like I said, if Xabi Alonso actively wanted to get Grimaldo involved in the first place. Like I say, I guess now we'll never know, and we're just going to have to wait for the first few signings to see kind of how much input he is having on the team. But this one's a little bit disappointing anyway, right? Because I think Grimaldo is such a phenomenal player, and if we were going to be playing that Xabi Alonso 3-back system, his output is so good, and like I say, that experience is really useful. He could be a general for us who understands what Xabi Alonso wants from him, and like I say, most importantly, not block off any pathways to current or future stars that we might bring in to play that position in the future. And guys, if you've made it this far into today's episode of the Stamford Sync, please do me the distinct honour of liking and sharing the video, subscribe to the channel, or just roast me in the comments, whatever gets you through your day. Right, so from one left back who's seemingly not a target, let's move on to another one. Fabrizio Romano posted this: Alvaro Carerras expected to stay at Real Madrid this summer. Jose Mourinho open to keeping former Benfica left back as backup for Cucurella, as Fran Garcia can leave the club. So this one has been a bit of a ping-pong story for a little while now, because I reported last week that Jose Mourinho had come out and said that he thinks they should try and sell him. Essentially, obviously, Marc Cucurella is going to be their starting left back now, and that totally makes sense. You spend 50 million on, 60 million euros on a left back with the skill of Marc Cucurella, and Jose Mourinho likes experienced players. Carerras is still a young up-and-comer who was brought to Real Madrid initially by Xabi Alonso, so there seemed to be a bit of a link in it there. There was some sort of conversation happening around the idea that he might be part of the Enzo Fernandez deal. But if they're allowing Fran Garcia to leave the club and they're not targeting other left-backs, which kind of makes sense, why would you want to? It feels like Real Madrid are open to keeping Carerras around and giving him a shot at being the understudy to Marc Cucurella. So guys, I'd like to know what you think about this one. A few of you have been really pushing Carerras as a great option for the left-back role. For me personally, I'd like to go in for someone with a bit more experience. And of all of the targets that we've been linked with at the moment, that is kind of starting to leave the likes of Cambiasso and Maxi Araujo. My choice out of those would be Maxi Araujo. Carerras does look like a real talent, don't get me wrong. 100%, and obviously having developed and worked under Xabi Alonso before, it's another one of those, isn't it? Kind of like I said with Grimaldo, kind of knows what the manager expects from him, but that is Two, potentially. I mean, it's neither of them are, obviously with Carerras, we won't know until the end of the window. It's probably going to take something in the range of the next few days for the Grimaldo news to go through, but they're in the negotiations. At the end of the day, if Atletico are willing to drop that kind of money on him, then that's where he will go. Now, what we hadn't seen before vis-a-vis Grimaldo was an amount of money. I am surprised that they are standing firm at 30 mil. But also not so surprised at the same time, because yes, they might lose him on a free at the end of next season, but his output is outrageous, and his output to them in a season potentially is worth that 30 mil, 100%. So fair play to Bayer Leverkusen for standing firm on it. But to be honest, since I've seen the amount of money they want for him, doesn't seem like a very Blueco thing, does it? And if Xabi Alonso isn't 100% pushing for the Grimaldo deal, I can see why that's happening. The Carerras one just seems like it's maybe being taken out of our hands. Maybe there's still a conversation to be had in the Enzo Fernandez deal about the swap, but at the end of the day, if they're allowing another left-back to leave the club, then it makes sense they're going to want to keep a backup. Right, next up, we've got this from Transfer News Live, posted via the Cy Phillips Sports Stack. Chelsea have heavily deployed scouts to the 2026 FIFA World Cup to closely monitor Tottenham Hotspur midfielder Lucas Bergvall. The Blues believe the Sweden international is open to a summer transfer, while his role under Roberto De Zerbi has become increasingly unstable, with frequent appearances out wide rather than in central midfield. Tottenham rejected approaches from Chelsea and Aston Villa during the winter window and remain reluctant to sell to a direct rival. Spurs value Bergvall at more than £57 million. Woo! That's a lot of money. So, bit of a strange one, but at the end of the day, I guess it does kind of make sense when you consider Tottenham are really looking to, they're buying players for their team, aren't they? They're going absolutely crazy with buying players for their team. I even saw a link with Adam Wharton to Tottenham today. Obviously, they look like they're interested in Tonali as well. They've got Andy Robertson, who, albeit was a free, but that's an upgrade. They've got Senesi. They're really, really going in on upgrading their team, and they are going to have to sell some players in order to make that happen. Lucas Bergvall, I do remember being linked with him in the winter window, to be completely honest. I'm not sure 100% if he's the exact type of midfielder that we need. Not for 57 mil at least. So I don't follow Tottenham very, very much, to be honest. Obviously, if they've got an absolutely outstanding, phenomenal player like the whole world knows about, yeah, of course we know. But I wouldn't say I follow Tottenham enough to know whether Lucas Bergvall's playing style would fit our team. So this is a question I've got for you guys. Is he worth 57 mil? B, do you think that he would fit into the team? Is he a wide option? But obviously that's, one of the reasons he potentially wants to leave Tottenham in the first place is because he wants to play central midfield. So like I say, I don't know a huge amount about him myself, but I'm not necessarily initially enamoured by the idea of giving Tottenham 60 mil for a player that they're not even playing in his favourite position. And as is with the transfer window, as soon as a link for Lucas Bergvall appears, someone else comes out to put it down. Pice posted this via Kieran Gill of the Daily Mail. I heard two names of potential interest, but checking with relevant contacts inside of Chelsea, the feedback I received was that Chelsea are not currently in for Bergvall or Nwaneri. So, interesting one here. So, Cy Phillips is an upcoming Chelsea journalist 100%, and he's normally got lots of really good information, but obviously Kieran Gill is really, really well known, and they completely disagree with each other at the end of the day. The other interesting factor of this is the Nwaneri thing. I remember us being linked to Nwaneri a little while ago. It has been something that's rumbling around. It's not something I think we should do, to be completely honest. I just think we've got so many players of that profile already in the squad. He's young and he's got potential, but because he's an Arsenal player, it would be very expensive for them to sell us one of their youngsters. He didn't exactly tear up trees. I think he was on loan in France for the back half of last season and didn't, like I say, really, really didn't tear up trees at all. So the Nwaneri thing, I kind of hope we don't go in for him, to be honest. Like I say, I think that there's other points in the squad that we need to be looking at and we need to be focusing on experience. Bergvall has the experience, but it's a lot of money, and like I said, I'm not really sure if he's 100% the right type of midfielder we'd be looking for in the team. Anyway, so, Nwaneri, happy about. Bergvall, not really sure about, but I want you guys to let me know. A little bit more from Kieran Gill. Pice posted this. Chelsea want to sign an attacker who is tried and tested. There's no secret that they really like Morgan Rogers. So, the first episode of the Talking Chelsea podcast has just been released, and my hot take was pertaining to Morgan Rogers. Go and check it out if you haven't already. Me and Jay are going to be doing a weekly podcast now, loads and loads of fun. Morgan Rogers is just a player that I really, really want us to go for. And I understand it's difficult, A, because he's at the World Cup at the moment, so I don't expect anything to happen until after that. But also, a lot of the noise circulating around is that he's really interested in Arsenal. And of course, that makes sense because they're the league, the league champions. And, obviously they're going to want to upgrade on the likes of Martinelli. They're going to want to upgrade on the likes of Trossard. The only thing with the Morgan Rogers to Arsenal thing is I look at Eze, who was, before he went to Arsenal, one of the best attacking players in the league. And because of Arsenal's particular style of football, he hasn't really gotten the best out of himself. And Arsenal haven't managed to get the best out of him during that run. So I foresee potentially something similar could happen to Morgan Rogers if he goes to Arsenal. It could be a case of, like I say, Eze for me, I'd have loved if we'd have gone in for Eze. I remember doing a story about us trying to hijack that deal. And I would really hate, if Morgan Rogers doesn't come to Chelsea, that's one thing. But if he goes to Arsenal and becomes half the player that he is, because they continue to focus on, really, really strong defence, really robust midfield, set pieces, corners, long throws to win games, then that isn't going to be getting the best out of Morgan Rogers' skill set at the end of the day. So for me, I just really want to see Morgan Rogers come in. I think that there's so many reasons that it works for Chelsea. I think he could be an absolute linchpin of our attack. And I think Xabi Alonso would be able to get the best out of him and express himself because he's got a good track record of working with attacking players. On another target, Pice posted this via Kieran Gill again. As reported a while back, Lecroix is someone that Chelsea have looked at for centre-back. Personally, I wonder if Chelsea would go back in for Huijsen. He had a huge admiration inside the club and Chelsea were disappointed to lose out on him. So the link there again is to Lecroix, who's someone I really, really like. Initially I wanted Jan-Paul van Heck, but he's obviously on his way to Tottenham as well, which is absolutely wild because they nearly got relegated last season and they've got some excellent players already in the window. It's crazy. But I like Lecroix 100% as another option. I think we are missing a player like him at the moment. I think he's got winning experience. I think he's a good age. He's 26 on his way to 27. So we could definitely still get a few years out of him while we develop the people behind him. And I really, really like that. The other interesting thing here is Dean Howson, right, from Real Madrid. Jose Mourinho's Real Madrid is not going to be a fantastic environment to develop young players at the end of the day. Dean Howson was a massive player in the Premier League for Bournemouth and obviously 50 mil, I think it was, he went to Real Madrid for. But they've gone and got Konate. They've signed Antonio Rudiger onto a new deal. They're talking about Ruben Diaz as well. It looks like they're really trying to upgrade their defence with experience. And because of this, Howson may well fall back in the pecking order. So there's no links with him at the moment yet, but he is obviously still really young. He's a very good player. He's got Premier League experience already, so that's a really interesting one. Albeit not a link. It's amusing, a wondering from Kieran Gill. I would like to know what you guys think about Howson in the comments. Do you think that's something we could do with the Enzo Fernandez deal? Does he upgrade our defence as it is at the moment? And that's it for the transfer news today, guys, but we've got another couple of interesting stories to get onto. The situation about Enzo Maresca being tapped up by Man City in the middle, which potentially derailed our season, has been ongoing and it looks like it's going to come to a conclusion. Chelsea Dodgers posted this via the Guardian Sports. Man City close to financial settlement with Chelsea to appoint Enzo Maresca. Chelsea sources have indicated they have sufficient evidence to report City for making an illegal approach, but have no plans to do so and are continuing to negotiate. So that's fascinating in itself, because what that is literally saying is that we have evidence that City made an illegal approach to Enzo Maresca whilst he was our manager. And all of a sudden, the things start to click into place. It is really starting to look like that Enzo Maresca absolutely snaked us in order to get out of the club. We were second in December. And then all of a sudden, 8-9 games after December, we absolutely capitulated. He came out and said what he said after the Everton game about the worst 48 hours and not being supported. And then lo and behold, all of a sudden, he goes. He leaves. He walks away without... He didn't get sacked because we wanted to keep him. He actively walked away, and that means that he lost any payout that he might have got as well. So... what this is saying is we've now got evidence that Man City made an illegal approach, but we are supposedly not looking to take them to task for that if we can reach a settlement, a financial settlement. So Chelsea Dodgers also posted this via the Guardian Sport. A financial settlement worth over £10 million to Chelsea for Enzo Maresca is thought to be the likely outcome, with negotiations between Chelsea and Man City over the finer details ongoing. So this is as good as an admission of guilt at the end of the day. Chelsea are looking to get 10 mil, which doesn't seem like a lot, but I guess, money's money at the end of the day, isn't it? And especially where we are at the moment, 10 mil's 10 mil. But instead of taking them to absolute task, which it looks like we could do by the sounds of it, because we've got evidence that they made an illegal approach, we're going to settle on 10 mil and the negotiation, the finer details, whatever that means. So like I say, all this is pointing towards is that Maresca is a bit of a snake at the end of the day, because it all makes sense as well. It all fits with the actual information that came out in and around the story. I think it was the day after or 2 days after Enzo Maresca kind of dropped his 48-hour bomb after the Everton game, which was the only win in one of 8 or 9 games in a row. Like, we were terrible, absolutely terrible. After that, that's when David Ornstein dropped the news that Maresca was on the list of targets for Man City if Pep Guardiola were to leave at the end of the season. I would have thought that Pep Guardiola already knew he was going to leave at the end of the season, but they were going for the Prem, and at the end of the day, he didn't want to risk that, not happening, did he? And obviously left it right up until the end of the season to announce that he was leaving. But David Ornstein, in that announcement, also said that there were other names on this list and he'd been sat on it for a while. It wasn't a case of Enzo Maresca left Chelsea or said what he said and then all of a sudden Man City had put Maresca on this list. Man City had Maresca on this list for quite a while, and it looks like Enzo Maresca just took the Chelsea job in order to wait for Pep Guardiola to leave, and maybe this is something that was always going to happen. He's got the Man City links already. Obviously, he was the under-21s coach, and then he was the assistant coach for their treble-winning season, which was phenomenal. He's obviously well-liked at the club because despite him, he had some good results at Chelsea, 100%, but he's not exactly looking like Pep level. But either way, they are going in for him at the moment. Personally, my opinion on the Maresca thing is he's going to be their transitional manager whilst they deal with the 115. And I think the results of the 115 might be announced during the World Cup or sometime before next season. But I expect City to get a points deduction based on what's going on. And that makes sense as well because you look at, they're not fighting us on this thing either. They're basically, the fact that we're talking about a negotiation for money and the fact that we've got evidence mean the City have basically as good as come out and said, yep, absolutely, we did that. And that means that Maresca was their man one way or another, and to be honest, it wasn't because he won the Conference League and it wasn't because he won the Club World Cup, was it? Let's be completely honest here. Man City, after Pep Guardiola, should be going out for the biggest manager in the world because that's kind of what they used to. The guy that has got winning experience that is going to come in and win. This will be the first time that they've gone for this kind of manager who is a project manager, a development manager. And to me, it just screams that they are looking for him to take them over this transition. I think it's really interesting as well. If you look at Elliot Anderson, who's the big target that they're in for at the moment, 120 mil, huge amount of money, but it's not like he's coming from a Champions League team or anything. Even if Man City get a 20-point deduction next season and maybe miss out on Europe, being at Man City still an upgrade for Elliot Anderson, but you notice that they're not necessarily being linked to any massive stars from any massive teams either. They've been building a young project for a little while as well, which also makes sense. So for me, like I say, this whole thing just stinks of Man City have been planning for this for a little while. And Maresca was part of it at the end of the day. I kind of, this is my tinfoil hat moment, and it's becoming less so because the evidence is kind of there. It's not like Man City aren't coming back out and being like, no, we didn't tap him up at all. We didn't do anything wrong. They're basically admitting yeah, we did do something wrong. And if they would have come back at us and been like, no, we didn't, we've got evidence to prove that they did. And obviously, we're choosing not to take them to task over that and instead just negotiating for a financial settlement. So, there you go, guys. There it is. Maresca snaked us, derailed our season. We didn't want to bring Liam Rosenior in. We wanted to keep hold of Maresca. Look, he wasn't happy with the Blueco model, and I'm not saying that Blueco are blameless in this at all, because if Blueco would have provided him with the tools that he wanted and given him a bit more control of the team like they're looking to do with Xabi Alonso, then maybe none of this ever would have happened in the first place. But he did a season and a half with us, and evidently after the Levi Colwill loss and him saying, I want a new centre-back, they didn't back him, they didn't support him. Maybe that was the final straw for him. I'm not 100% sure. What we don't have yet is any kind of inkling of when, Man City kind of tapped him up and when the negotiations begin. And because we're going for a financial settlement, we probably won't find out that information either. It's probably all going to be kept under wraps. Either way, if Chelsea are happy with the 10 mil, whatever, I guess. I mean, 10 mil doesn't seem like that much when you consider how many points we potentially lost through the difficult situation that we went through, and that situation is also leading to things like Marco Correa going to Real Madrid and Enzo Fernandez. This whole situation derailed our season and things could have been really, really different now. But ultimately, if I'm completely honest with you, I'm really happy that we've got Xabi Alonso. If you'd have asked me when we got Maresca, who would I rather have, it'd be Xabi Alonso. If after we won the Club World Cup and the Conference League, if you'd have asked me, would you swap out Enzo Maresca for Xabi Alonso at that point, I'd probably have said yes too. I really like Xabi Alonso as a manager. I've been following him, with great interest since his time at Leverkusen. So to be honest, albeit it's taken us a rocky road to get to where we are now, ultimately things have probably played out for the best. So guys, I'd love to know what you think about this whole thing. And just one last thing on the Enzo Maresca situation, it's kind of interesting. Kieran Gill posted this: provided he is announced as expected, Chelsea's first reunion with Enzo Maresca will be away at Manchester City circa December 12th on the weekend anniversary of his worst 48 hours comments. So that's just going to be wild, isn't it? Like, and this is one of the things I love about football is like all of a sudden, City have always been a rival in terms of, you know, we both want to do great things. Now, at the end of the day, City have been on the most phenomenal run of almost any Premier League team in history over the last 10 years. They are winning titles all of the time. They've been absolutely phenomenal. But there wasn't like the personal sort of thing before, was there? Like, for instance, there's two things that's happened this season that make two games really, really interesting. One of which is Enzo Maresca going to City. The other one is us getting Xabi Alonso, Liverpool getting Andoni Iraola, and then, you know, when we play Liverpool, that's going to be really interesting as well, because it's going to be a case of, obviously Xabi Alonso's a Liverpool legend, but it's going to be, did we get the right manager sort of thing, and that's going to be really interesting as well. So there are some new little small rivalries breeding for different reasons than there were before. Like I say, City have always been a rival because of the status of the club, and they win leagues and Champions Leagues. In our history, we have won leagues and Champions Leagues, and there's that kind of thing. But now we've got Snaky Maresca being their manager, and the first time we're going to come up against him is the year anniversary of when he threw us under the bus. So I just love it, man. I just love it. Like, the drama in football is tangible, it's palpable. And I think this is going to be a really interesting game. So just a couple of bits of news to wrap up with. We're going to move away from the Premier League into France. Fabrizio Romano posted this: Ipswich Town are set to seal the agreement with Gary O'Neil as the new head coach. All done with formal steps to follow, as Gary O'Neil and FC Strasbourg are set to part ways soon. Ipswich Town FC agreed terms with Gary O'Neil. So I was just talking about these little rivalries, and this is potentially another one, isn't it? And look, like, Chelsea fans, like, we don't have anything against Gary O'Neil personally, but I imagine that Bluco will, because he came out and obviously kind of slated them at Strasbourg, didn't he? So again, there's just another little thing there. It'll be really interesting to see. Now, Gary O'Neil going to Ipswich means he's leaving Strasbourg, which leaves the Strasbourg position open. I understand, as Chelsea fans, not a lot of you really probably care who's going to go to Strasbourg. I do. I find it absolutely fascinating. And I've got a feeling, although he has come out and said that he's going to take a break from football, maybe it's Liam Rosinia. I talked about this before when they were both being linked to Ipswich, and they've obviously gone for Gary O'Neil. Is this an opportunity for Liam Rosinia to kind of go back to the place where he was developing, that he was comfortable? He obviously wasn't ready for the Premier League at the time. Bluco obviously like him as well. The thing is, Bluco wouldn't have wanted to sack him because he is the company man and they like him, but he obviously just wasn't good enough to be the Chelsea manager. And he was linked to other Premier League teams at the time as well, but since coming to Chelsea, his stock will have dramatically decreased. So is there a kind of permutation here where Liam Rosinia ends up going back to Strasbourg because Gary O'Neil comes to Ipswich in the Premier League? So I find that one really interesting. If you care at all, I mean, and a lot of you won't, so skip past this section if it's not something that's interesting for you. But what I would love to know from you guys is, if you do care about the Strasbourg thing at all, would you like to see Liam Rosinia go back there, or do you think we should get some fresh blood in? Right, next up, the Premier League fixture schedule has been announced, and we're going to take a look at the first 6 Chelsea games of the season. So CFC Daily posted this: our first 6 games, Fulham versus Chelsea. That is an away match for us. It's in London. Absolutely love it. Chelsea versus Brighton at home. Staying in London. Absolutely love it. Arsenal versus Chelsea for the 3rd game. That's a little bit savage, but again, it is an away game, but ultimately in London, so not loads of travelling. Chelsea versus Hull at home. In London. Brentford versus Chelsea away in London, and Chelsea versus Bournemouth at home in London. So look, it's all about small margins at the end of the day, isn't it? And for us to be able to play our first 6 games in London without needing to travel anywhere it's not an indication of whether we're going to win or lose those games, but it's just another good thing, isn't it? Like, we get to stay in London for the first 6 games, go down the road to play some of our rivals and opponents. But in general, I think it's a bit of a mixed bag, because look, normally, in any normal time past, you would have gone Chelsea beat Fulham, Chelsea beat Brighton, Chelsea struggle against Arsenal, Chelsea beat Hull, Chelsea beat Brentford, Chelsea beat Bournemouth. Normally, that is what you would assume. But Fulham are going to have a new manager as well as us, so maybe that feels like more of an odds-on win. Brighton, Finished in Europe last season, had a really good season. Pretty much all of these teams, bar Hull and Fulham, finished above us in the Premier League. The Arsenal game is going to be difficult. Arsenal obviously will add to their squad, and it's going to be Xabi Alonso's first real test. We haven't beaten Arsenal in a really, really long time now, which is kind of frustrating and really difficult to take. We played Hull in the FA Cup last season and absolutely battered them. That's probably 3 points in the bag. Brentford had a great season, really, really good season. And again, that is just not a given anymore, as it might have been at once. And Bournemouth are in a similar situation to Fulham at the end of the day. They are in Europe though, but they have also lost Andoni Iraola. So again, it's a crazy one there. Fulham and Bournemouth largely depend on the managers that go in, I guess, and how strong their windows are. You would have thought that Bournemouth might have a strong window because they got into Europe, but at the same time, if they don't pick up the right manager, it might not be a good season for them. Brighton are always just a tough game in general. Arsenal obviously is going to be tough. Hull should be a win there. Brentford, not normally, but at the moment, looks like it could be a tough game. So, the first opening 6 games of the Premier League, that's a bit of a gauntlet, to be completely honest. Like, for the most part, we're talking about teams that finished really, really strongly and teams that massively overperformed their expectations as well. Brentford massively overperformed their expectation. Bournemouth massively overperformed their expectation. Brighton overperformed their expectation to an extent, but are always a difficult team to beat. So what do you think about our first 6 games in the Premier League? I think it looks like a bit of a gauntlet, and it's a real test of how Xabi Alonso's new Chelsea is going to fare in the Premier League. And we've got one more story to go through today. I've done loads of keep loan sales and, talking about the players that we've already bought and got on pre-contract agreements and stuff that are going to come into the club. Those include the likes of Emmanuel Omega, Giovanni Quenda, Mike Penders, Valentin Barco's on his way in as well. Who I haven't really talked about because there's not been much going on about him is Dastan Satpayev. But finally, we've got some news about him. Kieran Gill posted this. Dastan Satpayev is set to arrive in London earlier than expected after Carerras gave the 17-year-old Kazakh permission to travel to participate in Chelsea's pre-season. Then down to Xabi Alonso and CFC to decide whether he stays or leaves on loan. So that will be 6 strikers on our books in pre-season. João Pedro, Nicholas Jackson, Liam Delap, Emmanuel Omega, Mark Yu, Dastan Satpayev. All of a sudden, we've got loads of strikers, and at least half of them are not going to be at the club next season. Now, loads of you are really excited about Dastan Satpayev. My issue is potentially the fact that he's 17 years old. He's playing first-team football at the moment, and I feel like if you take anyone away from first-team football, like Philip, albeit very different positions, Philip Jorgensen is a similar example, right? Philip Jorgensen was playing well in the first team in Spain, and then we brought him here. He spends 2 seasons on the bench and regresses, right? This is the issue. He regressed. Is taking Dastan Satpayev out of Carerras and putting him into the Chelsea, probably the Chelsea Academy team, let's be honest. Is that a downgrade? Because the jeopardy is different, the pressure is different. Even if the league that he's in is not particularly strong, and technically, I don't know the technical standpoint of the league that he's coming from to the academy, but at the same time, it's not just about the technical standpoint, it's about the pressure and the mentality as well. Now, Strasbourg, that is still a jump up. That's a massive jump up, and I feel like he might find opportunities to get into that team. Obviously, we're taking Emmanuel Omega away from them. They've still got Joaquin Panicelli. So could Dastan Satpayev find his way over to Strasbourg and get some minutes in the French league, which is going to be a step up from where he's at, but less pressure than what he'd face if he came to Chelsea. Obviously, Strasbourg is going to be a better option than putting him into the academy, isn't he, at the end of the day? So he seems like a really, really exciting young player. And like I say, this is the first time we've kind of heard anything about him. The thing I found interesting, now I'm not sure if he's going to be 18 soon, but I assume the reason that we weren't hearing about him was because he couldn't get a work permit, because we're not in the EU anymore. And, wherever he's coming from, getting a work permit means you've got to be 18 essentially to be able to join Chelsea if you're not, a local. Essentially, if you're not a UK resident. So maybe that's not the case. Maybe there's something else going on there, or maybe he does actually turn 18 soon. It's something I will need to do a little bit more research about. But like I say, this one just came up as a bit of a surprise because he looks like a really interesting player. I think the fact that he's getting first team football is so important. And I would hate to see him just come into the academy and make 2 cursory appearances throughout the season, because you've got to bear in mind we don't have Europe. We're going to have less games. We've got a veritable bucket load of strikers on our books at the moment, so we really need to clear some of that out. Is it going to be a case of we end up with João Pedro as the number 1? one of Nicholas Jackson or Emmanuel Omega as the number 2. I expect Liam Delap to be sold. I expect Mark Gu to probably go on loan. And then maybe we end up with the likes of Dastan Satpayev as the 3rd choice. Is that the best thing for his season? It's just one of those. At the end of the day, Xabi Alonso is going to take a look at him. So that's going to be really interesting. What do you guys think about it? Do you think that it's, well, like I say, do you think it's worth him sticking around for cursory minutes this season and to work with Xabi Alonso? Or do you think we should send him back out to somewhere where he can either get or at least fight for first team minutes on a regular basis? Woo, guys, this is a massive one. This is a henge video, man, and I want to know what you think about everything that we've talked about today. Left backs, Grimaldo wasn't necessarily on the table, but seemingly is now completely off the table, with Atletico Madrid being interested in him, and that €30 million price tag is pretty huge. Carerras, the will they, won't they with Carerras is ping-ponging all over the place, but the current news is it looks like Real Madrid want him to stay. Lucas Bergvall was linked and then squashed initially, but I don't know a huge amount about him, the profile of the player at least, so I really want to know what you think about him. Kieran Gill says we're still in for the likes of Morgan Rogers and Lacroix, which I think are the type of players we need to be going for. Like I say, he's also written off the likes of Bergvall and Nwaneri, which I'm not particularly sad about, and also raised a question about whether Dean Huijsen would be an interesting opportunity. Enzo Maresca derailed our season. It's almost completely official because we are going to get a settlement out of it at the end of the day. Let me know what you think about that and how you feel about him. Gary O'Neil to Ipswich leaves the Strasbourg situation open. Do you care about it at all, or have you got an idea of a manager you'd like to see there? Talk to me about how you feel about Chelsea's first 6 Premier League games. Fulham away, Brighton at home, Arsenal away, Hull at home, Brentford away, and then Bournemouth at home. For me, seems like a bit of a gauntlet. And finally, some news about Dastan Satpayev. Really interesting that it's taken this long, but ultimately we're going to get to have a look at him in pre-season, which is exciting. Nice one, guys. I hope you're all having an absolutely wicked day, and if you have made it this far into the video, please be sure to check out one of 2 videos that I've released in the last few days. I did a collaboration yesterday with Dan Childs of Son of Chelsea, one of the OG Chelsea YouTubers. He picked his 5 players he'd like to see leave the club and 5 he'd like to replace them with. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, the first episode of the Talking Chelsea podcast is out now, so go and check it out. I hope you're all having an absolutely wicked day, and I'll catch up with you very, very soon. Take it easy. Peace.